What's up, everybody? Happy New Year. But sadly, this video is another wrestling tribute video I have to do. I grew up watching this guy. I started seeing Mean Gene when I was like 3 years old. Is when I became a wrestling fan, was at 3 years old. So, man, Mean Gene has been in my life for 32 years. The guy is a true icon in the wrestling business, true legend, a true Hall of Famer. The guy was Mean Gene Okerlund. This is my tribute to him. The guy was so good at what he did. Such a good interviewer. Not just interviewer, the guy was a good broadcaster. The guy could be a ring announcer. He could be on commentary. He could do anything. So, Mean Gene Okerlund was born on December 19th, 1942. And sadly, passed away in 2019. This is only the second day. This is only January 2nd. And sadly, we have lost another legend in wrestling in the new year. Just very sad. I understand Mean Gene was 76 years old. He was older. He had health problems. A couple health problems, not anything really awful. I don't know. I didn't hear he was sick at all in 2018. And I just saw him. I'm sure it's taped maybe a year ago, but I just saw Mean Gene on the Edge and Christian show on the network. He was on there. He was just on that episode, the kayfabe episode. He was on there. So I believe that's the last thing that Mean Gene probably did for WWE was the Edge and Christian show. So again, he just had a birthday on December 19th. He turned 76 years old. His wife is still living. He was married to her since 1964. So they are married for 48 years. 2019 would have been 45 years they were married. That's a hell of an accomplishment. Obviously, Mean Gene was a family man. And the guy was a good husband because he stayed with his wife for over 40 years. So I'm going to talk about his career now. He debuted in wrestling in 1970, I believe. He probably had other jobs before he got into the AWA, but that's when he started in wrestling. He studied broadcast journalism. He landed a job as a disc jockey on the radio, on a popular radio station in Nebraska. By the way, he went to the University of Nebraska and graduated. So later on, Mean Gene, after that radio job in Nebraska, he would move to Minnesota, working at a local television station in the front office. Then in 1970, all the way to late 1983 into 84, I believe he left in late 1983. But from 1970 to 84, he He left the radio industry for a position at the AWA, where he was a ring announcer on occasion. He was a backstage interviewer. And he would become one of the interviewers' replacements by the end of the 70s. So he was full-time as a backstage interviewer, I believe, with the AWA. So he was really good in the AWA. First off, Mean Gene, the guy had a great voice. Got a great voice for radio, TV, ring announcing, interviewing, anything. The guy had a great radio voice. Had a great voice. And the guy was damn good at his job. So he left AWA at the end of 83, I believe. He left partly because of Hulk Hogan. Got Mean Gene to leave and come with him to New York and to work for the WWF and Vince McMahon Jr. I do believe that Hogan did help Mean Gene and get a job. He probably told him, come with me, I'll get you a job with WWF. And I don't know if Hogan got Mean Gene to go to WCW. I don't think so, because Mean Gene showed up in WCW in November 93. Hogan was not there until June 94. And I don't think Bischoff or WCW started talking to Hogan until probably May or April 94. So Mean Gene probably got a deal by himself to go to WCW. I don't think Hogan had anything to do with that. But I do believe Hogan was a good friend of his. I do believe Hogan loved Mean Gene. They had great chemistry together when they would do interviews together. It was magic. Hogan and Mean Gene were great together. They were magic. So, as I said, in late 83, Mean Gene, probably December, went to the WWF. I believe in December 83, he actually appeared on camera in the WWF on an episode of, I think, All American Wrestling, where he interviewed Bob Backlund and Hulk Hogan, where Hogan came back to the WWF because he was there before in 1980 and 79 and 78 when he worked for Vince Sr. But Mean Gene, I do believe it's on I forget the name of some Hulk Hogan DVD WWE released in 2002. They do show Mean Gene on there in December 83 interviewing Hulk Hogan, and he says to Hogan, "You're back here now. What are you back here to do?" or something like that. So then he'd work for the WWF for about 10 years, almost 10 years. Had a great run in the WWF. Some of the best work of his career, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed Mean Gene in WCW. He was really good. He had the hotline. He had his wrestling hotline. I still remember the number, 1-900-909-9900. Call the wrestling hotline. Mean Gene said he had all the scoops. This was before a lot of the dirt sheets, where there were like probably over, or now there's probably like, well over 100 dirt sheets you can find to look at. But before the dirt sheets and all the spoilers and wrestling news, before those really started, Mean Gene had the scoops. He had his hotline. That was pretty cool. I never called it, but I do remember the number. So, as I said, he worked for the WWF. He was really good in WCW, but he was at his best in the WWF. He had great interviews, memorable interviews with Iron Sheik, SummerSlam '89. He was interviewing Rick Rude and Bobby Heenan, and the SummerSlam sign in the back fell. And it was probably pre-taped, but Mean Gene turned around and started cursing. That was damn funny. And the guy had, Mean Gene could either look at you and put you over as an interviewer or kind of bury you. And he kind of buried Ultimate Warrior. Every time the stupid Warrior would just go on and on, wouldn't shut up. I don't know what the hell he's talking about in his promos, but the guy would go on and sound like he's on drugs or from another planet. Mean Gene would look at the Warrior like, this guy is nuts. This guy's off his rocker. Something's wrong with him. I always thought that was really funny when Mean Gene would have to interview the Warrior. Mean Gene had great interviews with, as I said, Iron Sheik, Rick Rude, Macho Man. His interviews with Macho Man are legendary. His interviews with Hulk Hogan are legendary. His interviews with Ric Flair were great and legendary. So Mean Gene had a great run in WWF from the start of '84 until '93. His final pay-per-view for the WWF, the final pay-per-view he worked, I believe, was SummerSlam '93. And then he debuted in WCW at the November '93 pay-per-view Battle Bowl. So it does say on this page about Mean Gene's career I'm looking at, because I don't want to get anything wrong about his career. I know a lot. I know a lot of what he did. It's all up here. But I just want to make sure I get it right for his tribute. So it says Mean Gene's last final appearance was at SummerSlam 90. His final appearance was September 18th, '93, on an edition of Superstars. Or he let his contract expire. And he told someone in a shoot interview that he could have renegotiated a new contract, but he was never offered one, I guess. So again, he actually debuted on the November 6th edition of WCW Saturday Night. In his first pay-per-view I saw him in WCW is Battle Bowl '93. So Mean Gene was involved in, he worked like every single week, just about. He worked on Monday Nitros also, interviewing wrestlers by the stage or in the ring. That was pretty cool. Mean Gene was there when Monday Night Raw started, but I don't barely ever remember seeing him in the ring interviewing anybody. I don't know why, but Vince McMahon, basically, or Bobby Heenan, or Vince McMahon interviewed all the wrestlers. So Mean Gene was a part of the '93 Monday Night Raws, but he was like, I believe, in a pay-per-view special report segments. He wasn't live in the arenas. So he was there on the interview where Booker T, I guess it's Spring Stampede '97, Mean Gene was involved in a infamous botch when Booker T accidentally shouted out that Hulk Hogan that they were coming for you. And then he said the N-word. And Booker T noticeably immediately regretted it. And I guess Sherry was trying to hold back laughter at the time. I should check out that Spring Stampede 97 on the network to see how the reactions were. I wonder what Mean Gene thought at the time. So WCW ended. We all know they went out of business and died. And they actually could have survived, but it's all their fault that they died. And the merger with AOL Time Warner, that did not help WCW. But especially in the year 2099, they shot themselves in the foot. So Mean Gene actually, I'm going to go back to his WWF run in the 80s. He actually wrestled and teamed up with Hulk Hogan to take on George the Animal Steel and Mr. Fuji. One of the matches were in AWA's territory, Minnesota. Mean Gene had a famous segment, I believe it's on Tuesday Night Titans, I think it was shown. Probably in 85, maybe 84. But Mean Gene was shown in a whole bunch of segments, vignettes, where Hulk Hogan was training him. It was pretty epic. Hulk Hogan was on the back of Mean Gene. Mean Gene was carrying him up a whole bunch of stairs. That was hilarious. So it says Mean Gene wrestled in WCW in the year 2000 twice. I don't know why. Vince Russo, if you made him do that and that was your idea, you're stupid as hell. Or you had to wrestle Buff, or he faced Buff Bagwell, and Chris Kanyon had Mark Madden as his partner. Pathetic. Buff Bagwell, Mean Gene won. God awful booking. Whoever booked Mean Gene to wrestle, that was stupid. So he returned to the WWF. He returned home where he belonged, in my opinion. Returned home in 2001 at WrestleMania 17 for the Gimmick Battle Royal. He's on commentary with Bobby Heenan. Again, I'm going to go back to his WWF run. Bobby Heenan and Mean Gene were so damn good together. Such a great team together. They hosted All American Wrestling together. And they were together for some Superstars episodes, and they were together sometimes on Primetime Wrestling. And Mean Gene, go back on the network. If anybody hasn't, go back, watch Tuesday Night Titans from 1986. TNT, Tuesday Night Titans, go back, watch it, 1986. Mean Gene became the host of that show, and he was damn good. He was damn entertaining, interviewing all the talent. So after the Gimmick Battle Royal in 2002, he started hosting WWE Confidential, which lasted 2 years. It was a weekly series, and it was on Spike TV at the time. I thought WWE Confidential was a very good show, and Mean Gene was the perfect fit, perfect host to do it. Mean Gene would also host on the MSG network, Madison Square Garden WWE Classics, that aired on MSG. He was also a host for WWE Classics on Demand, Hall of Fame section. And WWE Class on Demand basically was kind of what WWE Network became. So Mean Gene would go into the Hall of Fame. WWE Hall of Fame in April 2006. He was inducted by, I'm sure the guy was a real good close friend. Like the guy or not, I'm sure he was good to Mean Gene, and Mean Gene was good to him. Hulk Hogan inducted Mean Gene in 2006. Great quote, he said, the end of his speech. He said he requests to be buried face down upon his death so his critics can kiss my ass. Great quote. June 2008, he started hosting WWE Vintage Collection. And eventually, Renee Young actually started working with Mean Gene. And so it was Renee Young and Mean Gene hosting Vintage Collection. Let's see here. Mean Gene Okerlund in 2009 inducted longtime ring announcer Howard Finkel into the Hall of Fame. Mean Gene returned in November 2010 for an old school episode of Raw where he would do a lot of interviews with John Cena, Randy Orton, members of Nexus, and Mae Young. Mean Gene made an appearance at WrestleMania 27, I think. 27, in a segment with The Rock and Pee Wee Herman. Mean Gene, April 10th, 2012, during an episode of SmackDown Blast from the Past, Mean Gene teamed up with Sheamus as they defeated the team of Daniel Bryan and Alberto Del Rio. I forgot about that. March 2013, Mean Gene would return to an old school Raw for Mae Young's 90th birthday party. January 7th, 2004, Mean Gene returned and made an appearance on a third episode of Old School Raw, where Mean Gene inducted Mr. T into the Hall of Fame in 2014. Mr. T, by the way, had a great speech at the Hall of Fame. The guy loves his mother. So Mean Gene then would return. Again, this is on the WWE Network if you want to watch it. Mean Gene returned, became part of the original cast of WWE Network's Legends House. I remember him on the show. I watched every episode. I enjoyed it. And Mean Gene was damn good on it. So January 22nd, 2018 is a final appearance on Raw or SmackDown. Mean Gene made his last appearance on the 25th anniversary of Raw, where he interviewed AJ Styles. But I do believe the Edge and Christian show, the kayfabe episode, might be Mean Gene's last appearance anywhere on TV. Mean Gene Okerlund, the guy did a lot of media, was on so many other shows. Mean Gene Okerlund died on the morning of January 2nd at the age of 76 in a Sarasota, Florida hospital. And it was later confirmed on WWE social media that there was no apparent cause of death. I don't know what he died from. It doesn't matter. It is really sad. For myself, I grew up watching Mean Gene Okerlund. Kind of just like when Bobby Heenan passed, Dusty Rhodes, Roddy Piper, those guys, Macho Man Randy Savage, and now Mean Gene Okerlund. part of me inside is heartbroken again. So 2019, this is not good news for the second day of 2019 or whenever you're watching this. Please, no more wrestling deaths for the rest of 2019, please. So, me, Gene Okerlund, you were damn funny. You were naturally funny. You didn't even have to try hard. You were funnier than a lot of comedians. You were great at your job. Me, Gene Okerlund, you brought me a lot of joy as a fan. A lot of joy. I just want to say thank you very much, me, Gene Okerlund, for everything you did. Just from me, thank you. You were in the business for for 5 decades. Over 5 decades almost. So yeah, he was in the business for 48 years. 48 years he was in the wrestling business. And he was always professional. All the wrestlers, everybody that worked with him, always are saying what a great guy Mean Gene was. If anybody has a bad thing to say about Mean Gene, I'll destroy you on social media. Verbally, in tweets, I'll destroy you. I don't think anybody in wrestling has a bad thing to say about Mean Gene or a bad word. The guy was liked by everybody. If you do have a bad thing to say about him, you're scum. He was great to the fans, and he was great for the wrestling business. This is a huge loss to old school fans and newer fans. Learn about Mean Gene and watch all his work on the WWE Network. He was one of the greats of all time. To me, Gordon Soley was not as good as Mean Gene Okerlund. Mean Gene Okerlund was my guy. He was awesome. So rest in peace. Now, before I go, Mean Gene has 2 children. One of them was actually a professional hockey player in the NHL. That's pretty cool. I believe his wife is still living. I hope. Hopefully she doesn't get sick because of losing her husband of a 44 year or 50, I think 54 years, 55 years. Yeah, 55 years or 54 years. 54 years she was married to Mean Gene. They were married for 54 years. Hopefully his wife's healthy and is okay. And I hope his children are okay. To all his friends and everybody he worked with, my thoughts go out to you. I'm just a hardcore fan. Again, thank you, Mean Gene, for everything you did for wrestling. You were great. Great at your job. Rest in peace, Mean Gene Okerlund.